Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about fruit and why fruit sugars are not actually a problem. And I'm not saying for people who are choosing to do lower carb diets, a lot of times I do phases with real low carbs. And so when it comes to that topic, we're not saying it's going to work when you're on a low carb diet. But what we need to discuss is the concerns with fruit sugar are not the same as other sugars. And again, it's a video I've made numerous times, but I've had a lot of people ask this over and over. So clearly people on both YouTube and Facebook are missing it. You know, they're like, man, a lot of people talk about fruit being bad. They're talking about it being sugar. And what we need to remember, we don't care about glucose as a negative. When we're discussing the negatives of sugars, our concern is not that things turn into glucose or blood sugar, right? This is not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. Glucose is the primary fuel source of most of the cells in the human body. And in fact, some of the cells in your body cannot burn ketones or fat at all. They cannot use it as a primary fuel source, like nervous tissue. Your brain thrives entirely off glucose. It is what it has to have to operate. So our concerns are not that. Also keeping in mind, even protein turns into glucose. So let's be clear. Our concern is when we develop some sort of insulin resistance, or we develop metabolic disorders to where we don't process insulin correctly, we don't create it correctly, we're insensitive to it, or we have some sort of glucose metabolism problem, right? So we need to be clear. These are metabolic dysfunctions. Like when we're at a point where we're like, oh, we're then concerned with blood sugar, it's not because blood sugar is bad. Not that it's not our primary fuel source, is that we have some sort of metabolic dysfunction that's creating it. Now, one of the things that contributes to this is excessive fructose, right? That's, again, fructose kind of coming from the idea of fruit sugars. Excessive fructose reaching our bloodstream and then our liver having to deal with it at a higher rate than the enzymes and digestive system in our body can, okay? So that's our concern. Now, people say, but a lot of fruit has fructose in it, a significant amount. Correct. But let's come over to that. Our bodies handle a certain amount of fructose relatively well. We don't burn fructose as fuel. So as fructose reaches certain of our organs, it becomes a problem, and our liver has to convert it into glucose. So our concern is, again, glucose not a bad thing. Our liver will convert fructose into glucose. However, it puts a serious load on it. All right, this can elevate triglycerides when it has to do too much of it. It can cause things like fatty liver deposits in our liver. Right? There's a lot going on here. It's a certain amount of toxicity to the liver, can elevate liver enzymes. All right, this is where we start having problems. Excessive amounts of fructose having to be dealt with by the liver to make it into glucose, which is what our body wants and needs. All right? This is the problem. Fructose has always been part of the human diet. We actually handle a reasonable amount of it fairly well. It's only become a metabolic issue because we have overloaded it in our body. We've reached a state to where we have too much refined fructose in our diet that our body can't process and handle. Does this make sense? It's, again, people say too much of anything is bad. Yeah, too much fructose is very bad. We know exactly what it does in the body. Just like we know what too much water does. We know what too much of arsenic, lead, we know what these things do, okay? They're well understood. Fructose is one of those. And that doesn't mean, oh, we can have, just limit your refined sugars. Well, no, I mean, can still get pretty bad pretty quickly. So again, understanding that it's refined sugars we're concerned with. So let's discuss what our body does to deal with it. All right, first of all, because fructose has always been in our diet, a perfectly healthy part of our diet, we have mechanisms to deal with it. Number one, fructose is actually helpful for feeding your gut biome, okay? Your healthy bacteria in your lower intestine, your gut, fiber feeds them, certain types of different foods feed them, certain sugars feed it, right? So your healthy gut can actually handle fructose. Okay, it's actually a decent fuel source for a lot of the healthy bacteria, the good bacteria we want in our gut. The problem is when we consume a bunch of refined sugars, most of it doesn't reach the gut. it's already digested. So it's already free fructose. So table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, honey, all those, as soon as our stomach acids hit them, it liberates all the fructose directly into the mix. There's free fructose floating around. Well, we don't have to digest it further. Our body doesn't need to do anything. It just absorbs it in the upper intestine. It hits the bloodstream quickly, right? Then we're left with the enzymes in our bloodstream to deal with it. And whatever those enzymes can't convert and cleave into glucose, our liver picks up the rest. Now people say, well, how much is that? We don't know because it varies. Different people produce different amounts of that enzyme. There seems to be a genetic component and everything else. So there's a lot to it. Okay, so we don't know how much. We just know that it's a relatively small amount that we would have to deal with, right? So that's what's happening there. So when we're dealing with fruit, though, guess what? Fruit has fructose in it, but it's bound a lot more. There's fiber. There's all this pulp. There's this matrix, right? It's a whole food. So what ends up happening, a little bit of the fructose gets absorbed early, right? A little bit of it gets thrown in early, but not a lot. Most of it still has to be digested further, right? It's still bound up in the fruit. So what happens? It reaches our lower intestine. Well, we have a lot of bacteria in our lower intestine, in our gut. It says, oh man, this fructose, I like this. Let's eat it. So what does it do? It ferments it. So it uses some of it up and then it ferments the rest into glucose. So there's a fermentation process that happens in there to where a lot of our gut biome will convert that fructose into glucose. It will eat some of it. And then all that glucose is left over, right? So it uses up a small amount of it for its own fuel, and then it ferments it and converts it into glucose. And then we absorb glucose slowly in the lower intestine with a nice steady trickle because of that fermentation process happening. Okay, we understand the difference here? So our gut biome handles most of it. Now, does some of it reach the bloodstream? Yes. Some of it will reach the bloodstream as fructose in the upper intestine, but it's going to be dramatically less than you would get from your refined sugars. Well, then guess what? We do have those enzymes and everything to handle it, and it's very unlikely for a lot of it to reach the liver beyond that. Some of it might, but our liver can handle a small amount of it. Okay? So ultimately, then our liver can handle small amounts. It's when we overload the liver. So it really isn't comparable to our concerns with all these refined sugars, right? So then we get fruit that has all this other benefits. It can help feed our gut flora. It has fiber, antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, all these things. And the little bit of fructose that's in there, in some cases it can be a lot, we handle it a lot better through those different pathways. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.